Simplifying radicals using the multiplication property of square roots, which is the square root of a times b is equal to the square root of a times the square root of b. What is the simplified form of the square root of 160? Well, the 160 can be factored into the square root of 16 times the square root of 10. The square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 10 is simplified. So 4 square roots of 10. What is the simplified form of square root of 72? Square root of 72 can be factored into the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. The square root of 36 is 6, and then square roots of 2. So 6 square roots of 2. What is the simplified form of the square root of 54 n to the 7th? So we have number and a variable. So to simplify this, we're going to look at it separately as the square root of 54 and the square root of n to the 7th. We're going to simplify both and then bring them back together. Square root of 54 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 6, which is 3 square roots of 6. N to the 7th, so when we have a variable, we take the variable and divide it by 2, and if there's any left over, we leave under the radical sign. So the square root of n to the 7th is n to the 3rd times the square root of n. So now on the outside, we have the number 3. On the outside, we have the variable n to the 3rd. And under the radical, we have a 6 and an n. Number 4. What is the simplified form of negative m times the square root of 80 m to the 9th? So on the outside, we have a negative 1 times m. And then we have the square root of 80 times the square root of m to the 9th. So negative 1 times m, and the square root of 80 can be written as the square root of 16 times the square root of 5, which is 4 square roots of 5. M to the 9th, we divide the exponent by 2, is 4, with 1 left over. So m to the 4th times the square root of m. So let's look at all the numbers on the outside. We have a negative 1 and a 4. So that's a negative 4. Let's look at the variables on the outside. We have an m to the 1 and an m to the 4. So that's m to the 5. And let's look at our numbers under the radical. We have the number 5 and we have the variable m. So negative 4 m to the 5th times the square root of 5m is the simplified form. All right, let's take it up a notch. What is the simplified form of 2 times the square root of 7t times 3 times the square root of 14t squared? So let's multiply what's on the outside, the 2 and the 3, we make that a 6. Then let's go under the radical and multiply the numbers. We have 7 times 14, which is 98. And then we have t and a t squared, so that makes us t to the 3rd. So 6 times the square root of 98 can be written as the square root of 49 times the square root of 2. So the square root of 49 is 7. So we have 7 times the square root of 2. And then t to the 3, we divide by 2. 3 divided by 2 is 1 with 1 left over. So that can be written as t times the square root of t. So let's look on the outside at any numbers we have. We have a 6 times a 7, which is a 42. Underneath, we also have a t on the outside. Then underneath the radical, we have this 2 and the variable t. So 42t times the square root of 2t. And one more. What is the simplified form of 7 times the square root of 7x times 3 times the square root of 20x to the 5th? So let's multiply the numbers on the outside. 7 times 3 is 21. Let's multiply the numbers under the radical. 7 times 20 is 140. Put that under the radical. And we also have the square root of x times the square root of x to the 5th, which is x to the 6th, square root of x to the 6th. So we have 21 times 140 can be written as the square root of 4 times the square root of 35. So 2 square roots of 35. And then we have x to the 6th. Remember, for the variable, we divide the exponent in 2. There's no remainder, so this just simplifies to x to the 3rd. So now let's look at the numbers on the outside. We have a 21 and a 2, which is a 42. Let's look at the variables on the outside, x to the 30. And then what's under the square root is the square root of 35.